Judeo-Christian to the core.
Yeah.
Because the notion that you just posited, that every single person has some sort of, you could say divine value,
yeah,
is a Christian idea.
Oh, of course,
and
yeah.
it's
it has its origins in the history of humanity.
Yeah.
Like it's, and not to get off on this tangent, but I used to be, and I'm still a non-religious person, and am an atheist, but I have a newfound respect for the origins of religions. And I probably already did, to be honest. You know what I mean? But it's...
And it's just... I understand that, for sure.
Yeah.
Because you can kind of do away with a lot of the hefty, potentially burdensome, metaphysical overreaches, perhaps, of certain religions, or like sometimes they're asking too much of you to just blindly believe in something.
Well, the origins of a
fact.
religion are completely different than... Okay, so like Peterson's criticism of... who am I thinking of now?
Sam Harris?
Richard Dawkins.
Oh, yeah.
He says, like, Richard Dawkins' God that he criticizes is the same one that a 13-year-old kid criticizes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or a 13-year-old kid believes in. You could look at it that way, right? And there's some truth to that. You know what I mean? But the reality is that there's a lot of people living with that idea of God as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not, and this is the thing, and I like to use like the bubble analogy, is that all of us, like, somewhat free-thinking, enlightened people, or whatever, like, we're looking at this from a completely different standpoint than, like, some pretty strictly to the word religious people.
Oh, yeah,
right?
You're right.
And they're not even looking at it as, like, beautiful metaphors that have, like, millions of years of history, in a way, in their sentences,
Yeah, and that's a good point, too, because it's like, if you don't draw the line at any given place, or you don't chop it up, and you look at this seamless string of life from primordial in the water, nothing, basically, to fully conscious humans.
Yeah.
It's an unbroken chain of reproducing and reproducing cells and biology and history, and then the very foundations of a social structure as grand as our civilization being present in, like, rats and other rodents, where they're social and they live together, and there's a hierarchy amongst lobsters, for fuck's sake.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it's just this unbroken chain, and it's been in development for all of existence as far as we can tell, and here we are, this end result, the latest end result, at least. And
the most complex,
the most deep
version of it.
And so the most deep articulable, is that a word?
It is now.
Articulable truths from religion texts basically are, if they're actually true, and if there is such thing as truth, and you can debate that too, but we'll just, for the sake of this argument, assume that there's a thing called truth, and that if you speak it properly, you're speaking something that accurately represents all of that in some way. It's that deep. Yeah. And when I think about my own history and who I am, when I consider who I am as a human and who I am as an animal, as a primate, I think about myself even as something that stretches back that far into history, that even the groundwork for my biology functioning the way it does was laid down then too. Yeah. And so part of me functioning is that too, and there's single-celled organisms alive in me. Like, it's just,
I had that, like, I probably had it before, but I had this realization the other day, and it's me and fucking Mike and I were talking about something, man, that got so deep. It's one of those things where it's just like, there's no words anymore, and then the conversation's over. You know what I mean? It's like, you're like quivering, and there's no more words, and it's just like, okay, we got as far as we could, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you literally stretch out into uncharted territory.
Yeah, it's just like the English language is not enough, or I don't know enough of it or something. But, yeah, it's just like, I was standing in the shower, which is like a fucking great place to have some thoughts, because you're just there.
Yeah.
And it's a thing you've done for so long, it's always been that way, and it's just like, there's a bit of a calming reset point to bathing or showering yourself or whatever. But anyway, I was just in there and I was just like, you know, and I think this is where mindfulness comes into like treating depression and that kind of stuff. It's where it's like, I was just thinking about like the complexities of the world and all this kind of stuff, and like the complexities of myself and that I have a self and all these kind of things. And I just kind of realized, I was like, what the fuck is like, I am not one thing at all. Like I think, I'm wrong, I gotta ask Mike about this, but I think that the origins of like of human, or not humans, but it's like bacteria and like a fungus and a parasite or something like that. Like we know enough to be able to look at cells in our body and tell that like we have origins in these, you know, subspecies that have like that eventually evolved into like a multicellular organism or whatever, you know, like
a walking, talking ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't know enough about like biology or evolution really, like even touch on that kind of thing, but yeah, I'm thinking about like Paul Stamets a lot lately and stuff.
Oh,
like
he's
that too.
nuts.
Yeah, and it was just like, it's like, man, like, not that there's nothing to worry about, but I was just like, you know, I had this illusion of the self in a way, right? Mm. And it was just like, you know, I don't even know where I'm going with that, but it was just like, I'm this culmination and like, you know, thousands of years of these cells working themselves out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was just like, that's not, and you know, I think when you get to a point where you're like deeply suicidal or depressed or whatever, like you're the farthest away from that as possible.
Yeah.
So when I had that realization, I mean, that realization could fucking scare somebody too. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That could be a realization when you're in like the depths of the worst fucking mushroom trip of your life. You know what I mean? It's not always an easy, wonderful thought. And it was kind of scary because it was almost like the dissolution of the self.
Yeah.
Right? It's almost like it was ego death. That's exactly what it was, because it was at the height of like an extremely intense conversation where I couldn't use my words anymore, and then I'm just in the shower just thinking of I just like broke myself down completely. And then I had this realization of what I was as an entity, and then realized that what I'm living as each day in my life is probably not actually that. It's like a virtual reality of myself in a way, you know?
That's a lot of what the Hindus talk about.
Yeah.
Yogis. It's just like, that thing you think is you isn't actually there at all. It's just this weird phenomenon. Yeah. And it's not like they even got anywhere close to saying what exactly it is either, but that realization. And coming to a more Western tradition of the psychoanalysts, I've been really playing around with thinking along these lines lately too. Is that even just analyzing your own consciousness, which isn't something physical, although it's instantiated in physical things. It seems to be. Anyways, not like any of us have any fucking idea.
Exactly, yeah.
But it's not like you're just one personality either. It's like there are these multiple sources of motivation, and so each personality could be something like, oh, Glen when he's super overtired and hasn't slept. Yeah. You know, you become a whole different person with different goals and different aims and different things, and your perceptual framework of the world is filtered by where you're going. You know, you filter the world into tools and obstacles basically.
In a dialogue, which could be a language.
Yeah.
Right?
And so, you know, and then I know for me there's this personality in there, if I'm thinking along these lines, that its whole goal in life is to have every single tub of Ben and Jerry's cookie dough ice cream and eat all of it and never stop. And sometimes it fully takes me over. And
that's not where I thought you were going. Awesome.
Yeah, and so then little Ben and Jerry's addict in me comes out, and it's like it takes me over, and then I'm at the bottom of the pint in like 10 seconds, and I just left reeling, like I come back on. It's like, oh, that fucker took the wheel again.
Right, yeah.
And then that's like ad infinitum, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you know, the horny Glen or the fucking hungry Glen or whatever it is, and then there's like, and it's not obvious that any of those are any less you than, you know, you're just this collection of all these different parts, and you have, I mean, that's why the Greeks thought of themselves as the playthings of the gods, because he just got consumed by rage. Something took him over.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. So the gods for them, I guess. You know, if you take apart each emotion that a person can, not even each emotion, but each technology of thought, let's just say, and each technology of a personality that you have in yourself, or we have in society, is like their gods are like the purest example of each one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, they see an action and they're just like, that happened because of that god.
Yeah.
You are the plaything, right? Yeah.
And God is the right word too, because it's like beyond your control sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, and the rage just takes you over, and there's just nothing you can do.
Yeah.
You know, so it's, and then also along those lines too, I've been making note of how most of these polytheistic religions or mythologies, they always have a music god too, typically.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's like a god of music or a goddess of music, and I thought about how much that would make sense because music is something that takes you over too. You know, so like why not create a god of music in your schema or whatever it is. Yeah, and then apparently the Celts had a beer god. Yeah, and that makes sense too. Because you drink it, and then that guy's in the beer. And he takes you
it's something that you do that changes how you respond and how you act, right? And I mean,
maybe that's why they even refer to some liquor as spirits too.
So they originally thought, and it's more so than thought because it actually had an impact. Of course, you mentioned beer. I'm going to go on a beer tangent, but there was like I think I want to mention this in the last podcast. That doesn't matter.
That's all right. No one listens to these anyways.
Exactly. It's just me and you listening to it tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck. So the mash paddle, and the mash is like the steeping of grains, the extract of sugars. Beer wasn't necessarily boiled back in the day because they were using like actual fucking fire, and if you were to really get a raging fire going on a boil of beer, it would just boil over and ignite, and so you know what I mean. So they would use different technologies evolved or emerged or whatever to be able to like control flame in a boil, right? But for the most part, like they would have like really inefficient boil systems, and they would beer was kind of simmered. Or it just didn't really get that hot at all. So an ancient beer is almost like a no-boil beer, and some breweries still do that. A competition I was at last night, a home brewer from here, as part of our homebrew club, actually did a no-boil beer as a kind of a throwback to that, right?
Cool.
So anyway, so the mash paddle thing, because they weren't really doing a true boil, like a lot of microbes are still like surviving.
Yeah.
And so they would stir the mash with this mash paddle, and this thing would be like, and I really want to make one, but this thing was like an intricately like curved piece of wood, with like someone would have like family crests, I guess, on them, that kind of stuff, and these things were passed down through families. So, they were actually, by sticking this same piece of wood into the mash all the time and then just taking it and hanging it up on the wall, it was building its, like, the strongest culture will always thrive. Yeah. Right? Not always. You could introduce a new one that would wipe it all out. But for the most part, and especially in beer brewing, like, yeast are a pretty big cell compared to bacteria, and they usually have higher counts depending in the process, right? So it's like you generally will get a favorable population of microbes, right?
Okay.
So they kind of think that this mash paddle, like, so back in the day they thought that the mash paddle had spirits in it.
Oh yeah.
And they were like, this has to be passed down through generations. This needs to be passed down through the family because this is what's actually putting the spirit into